Welcome to the Sustainable Dish podcast. I'm Diana Rogers, a real food registered dietitian, author, and sustainability advocate. I co-host this podcast with James Connolly, who was a producer on my film, Sacred Cow. I also founded the Global Food Justice Alliance, an initiative advocating for the inclusion of animal source foods like meat, dairy, and eggs for a more nutritious, sustainable, and equitable worldwide food system. You can check it out and join me at globalfoodjustice.org. Thanks again for listening, and now on to our show. Hi everyone, Diana here, and because I'm doing so much travel for the Global Food Justice Alliance, I've dipped into the archive and selected some of my favorite shows for you in order to keep my content flowing on a weekly basis. If you'd like to keep up to date on the travel and advocacy work I'm doing, please join my growing community. You'll get access to a discussion community, ad-free podcasts, exclusive interviews, and you'll be helping to spread the word about the importance of livestock to our global food system. Visit sustainabledish.com/join, and thank you so much for your support. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Today I have with me my good friend Ayla, who I actually met when I was an RD student and did my internship under Ayla, and it was such an honor. And I was a fan then, and I'm blown away with where her career has taken her. And so it's so nice to have you with me.
Oh, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I remember that years ago, and you taught me a lot in turn too. I remember you coming with your books, that you had published, and all these introduced me to all kinds of new products to use with clients. So it was mutually beneficial.
So we live near each other. We've shared an office for many years, and we both at the moment are not taking on nutrition clients because we're so busy with our other work, and we've gone in, very different directions. But I think a lot of dietitians after some period of time end up not taking on clients and doing other work. Lily Nichols is the same as well. And you work a lot with her. So why don't you kind of talk about the evolution of your career as a dietitian?
Yeah. So, not taking new clients and really doing one-on-one work is a very, very recent thing. In fact, I'm really just kind of winding things down a bit over the past few months. And so, it hasn't even fully kind of come to fruition, but I started out, I knew early on that I wanted to be an RD, graduated out of a coordinated program, and then kind of went into doing some community work. Similar to you, sort of knew from the get-go that a hospital clinical job was not for me. I saw the limitations there and didn't feel like I'd be as effective. There's a whole host of reasons, but
it was still a cool experience, right? Like I'm still really glad. And, people come to me and they talk about, I don't mean to interrupt you. I just get excited. I'm sorry. I'm not being rude. But people talk about the RD program. And I actually think that's one of the benefits of the program is to have that clinical experience, just see it and experience it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think about rotations on like the burn unit and various like critical care settings. It was really, still there's applicable things that I bring into my work, but yeah, I really did a lot. I've like hustled most of my career. So I've done a lot of different things, but I have an entrepreneurial kind of heart. And so I've always done various business ventures and endeavors. And I started at private practice work. 12 to 15 years. I've been a dietitian a little over 15 years, and it wasn't shortly after that I started private practice work. So it's been a long time. And I really, if I add it up, I have worked with, in individual and group settings, thousands, of people. And I love it. I think, over the pandemic, I'm looking for a little break to kind of use my skills elsewhere though. Cause it's a lot of energy. And now I'm really enjoying, teaching, educating, and doing a lot for that for both health practitioners and also the lay public. And I'm most passionate about really influencing the way that we talk and treat fertility, in this country and abroad. And so that's where I've landed now and found my sweet spot with the work I'm doing.
Yeah. And it's a place where, there's a lot of opportunity because people will really do anything to have a baby. I mean, even I had some issues conceiving, and I remember just thinking, oh my gosh, I've spent my whole life, trying to not to get pregnant. And then when you just assume that the minute you actually intend to get pregnant, that you're going to get pregnant. And it took me many years. I ended up having an ectopic pregnancy, and had to take methotrexate, which drains your folic acid. And then I was very concerned, and this is way before I became a dietitian, but I was very concerned about birth defects, because folic acid is something that you need. And so you have really taken a deep dive into the needs of pregnancy and preconception, not only in women, but also in men. So can you talk about that a little bit? Like what, we're coming into this depleted just from our modern diets.
Yeah. This is something I'm just so passionate about talking about, because there's so much that we can do, and we can influence, not only to influence fertilization, like conception and getting that positive pregnancy test, but really the health of the pregnancy, the health of baby over the long term. And so to me, there's just a really big impact that we can have in what is called really the preconception period. So, and back when I started getting into this work, there was no one really, it didn't feel like there was anybody talking about nutrition and lifestyle for fertility. I mean, this is a while ago, and now there's more, but there's still not enough. We're kind of mostly in conventional settings, really funneled into treatments before the whole picture is really looked at. And so I just think we can get ahead of a lot of issues by focusing on the preconception window. And what that really is, I mean, there's really there is no too soon to start, but 3 to 6 months is a great time to start thinking about, for both women and men, your nutrient status, what needs to be addressed, and getting things in good supply, not once you've conceived and once you've gotten pregnant. There's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, one big one for women, is neural tube defects. So you mentioned birth defects, and that's a big one. And we hear a lot about folate, and it's the main reason why the food supply was fortified with folic acid, starting years ago now, and which is problematic, and we could talk about that if we, but the neural tube closes like week 5-ish of pregnancy. So that's like a week after a missed period, maybe, right? So you may not even know, that you're pregnant at that point. And folate is just one of many nutrients involved in neural tube defects and general pregnancy complication avoidance, right? So like we have a lot of nutrients that we've got to really kind of get up in good supply to avoid that. And choline is 95% of women are not even meeting the adequate intake level, which we know is set way too low, based on more current research. So there's a lot of reasons. And then for men, I'm most excited about some of the most recent research that's tying men's preconception health to pregnancy complications, like, preeclampsia, gestational diabetes, preterm birth, miscarriage, pregnancy loss, where really all of that burden has been historically, until very recently, and still is, put squarely on women's shoulders, when we now know that there's, regardless of past pregnancies a male may have had with previous partners or a clean semen analysis, there's still that preconception period still influences pregnancy health and outcomes and baby over the long term.
Yeah, so let's talk specifically nutrients and, food sources for them. I recently did a podcast with Ty Beal where we looked at global nutrient deficiencies, and some are less common in high-income countries like the US, but we still have huge prevalence of things like iron deficiency. And then you mentioned choline, which is not even on anyone's radar. And something that you can't get on a diet that doesn't have animal source foods in it. So let's talk about the best food sources for some of the most common nutrient deficiencies that are particularly important when we're considering fertility health.
Yep. Yeah, actually, you mentioned iron, and I think it's worth pointing out. I mean, So I do now in my current work, run FullWell, and I have created a prenatal multivitamin along with a men's product. And the prenatal by design actually does not contain iron. And I
Mhm.
actually, that's important. Not because it's not needed, because we know it is. By many, but that's a nutrient that really needs to be taken separately. So doesn't compromise, absorption of the other minerals, nutrients in the formula, right? Because it does impact the absorption of those other important nutrients, but it also needs to be really customized to your labs, to make sure you're getting appropriate doses. I mean, it's a tough one to tolerate, and ideally you're running lab work. And we've got on our site, I tried to do a blog post really covering the best ways to assess iron status so that you can hopefully get ahead of it and shoot for dietary sources first, because that is possible to meet your iron needs through diet.
Although it's
But
hard, but yes.
it's hard to do. It's hard to do. And it takes a real concerted effort. And I think it also requires making sure your iron status is good pre-conception, because those of us who have experienced pregnancy know that the first trimester is like not maybe when you're hitting the liver hard, and it can be tough. So to help you kind of get through that, and then after first trimester, as iron needs increase further, that can really help. So, I mean, we're really talking about animal source foods, for that heme iron. And I know in my practice, I know you've seen this too, women especially are just not eating, red meat, organ meats, animal source foods as much. And it seems to me over the past few years, I've seen it even decline further, so that's big. And of course we find in those foods, the other key nutrients coupled in there. So the choline, folate, B12, so those are when I see in the research and generally prescribed like the Mediterranean diet, for fertility. That came out of like Harvard's research, like Walter Willett, that crew. And there's some good data in there, but it's limited, because if we actually look at the nutrients that are needed for early for egg quality, follicle development, early embryo development, implantation, pregnancy, it really does come from more your red meats and organ meats and things like that. So, so that's important. And for men too, because, these same nutrients like the folate, the B12, the choline, they contribute to sperm quality and overall semen quality. So the motility, the morphology, the overall structure, and whether or not it's got damage, to it. And so there's that piece, as well as for both women and men, its role in methylation. So that's kind of, I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole, but that methylation is really interesting, and it's very nutrient intensive, and it comes into play big time with fertility.
Yeah, let's well, so we know with women, you mentioned choline, B12, iron, take that separately. If you need to supplement with it, I know that the standard prenatal that you would get from your doctor contains a ton of iron, which you mentioned not everyone can tolerate. And it's been a long time since I've been pregnant, but I seem to remember it makes you constipated when you take too much iron. Yeah. Is that the problem? Yeah. And actually, here's another reason why you should talk, if you're going to talk to a dietitian, talk to a specialist in this area, because it's been a long time. I mean, I could certainly look up what you need for pregnancy, but talking to someone like you or Lily or someone else that specializes in this is really the best, because you guys are so up to date on all the latest research. And although I'm, a little bit of a generalist, I tend to just focus on, more gut health and metabolic health, which is just a different set of skills, right?
Yeah, it is a unique stage of life. It is. And I often argue too, especially and now I know your audience isn't necessarily comprised of probably a ton of vegan or vegetarians, I would imagine, but
a lot of recovering ones that are probably very depleted. And also I'd love to chat too about what happens when you get pregnant with number two too soon, because there is an optimal time, and you can be very depleted especially going into second pregnancy. So, and I
Yep.
do have a lot of followers that are ex-vegetarians or vegans and in this stage of life right now.
Yep. Yeah, I would say, yeah, it's kind of tracing back to, it's really like that preconception period. Even I think I've seen over the years too, with practice clients and in general, that, you know, they may get through a first pregnancy on their stores, but having gone through a pregnancy, a postpartum healing, you know, experience, maybe breastfeeding, you know, caring for a baby and a toddler, and then going into a second pregnancy, you're depleted. I mean, you need more. And it's usually, I would say most often then when I'm seeing the actual fertility issues, like the difficulty conceiving, you know, because it's just that cumulative depletion that happens. So, you know, I think there's some data on pregnancy spacing. You know, 18 months seems to be kind of some of the better data that we have, but it really is dependent, right? Like on how well you recover and replete with the right nutrients. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also how much you're sleeping.
Yes.
Just because
Right.
it's so exhausting.
Mhm.
But I do remember thinking the first one crushed me with the sleep deprivation. And then the second one, I was already so worn down that I was like, what was I thinking? This thing's easy, you know? I don't know if you had the same experience.
I think I've only just started recently sleeping, you know, and my youngest, my second is like 2.5. Yeah. And it feels good, but I'm like, I feel like I'm still recovering in some ways, you know? Yeah.
So what are some of the nutrients that men in particular should be focusing on, and what food should they be maybe eating a little more of? Because iron deficiency in men, because they're not menstruating, is
Mhm.
less common.
Yeah, that's right. So iron tends to be less of an issue, but there's a lot of overlap in some of the other nutrients.
Mm-hmm.
So vitamin D is a big one for both women and men. But for men, you know, it's supporting not just their immune system. What we're really, and sorry, just to back it up. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
for men, one of the things that we're really looking to do is minimize oxidative stress, you know,
Right.
and one of the reasons why we are seeing generally higher rates of infertility, in the research, we're tracing it back to increased levels of oxidative stress. I mean, we're living in a modern environment with environmental exposures we can't avoid, some of which we can definitely mitigate with changes, but we've just got a lot more stress, a lot more environmental exposures that we have to deal with. And so for men, it comes down to really mitigating oxidative stress with lots of antioxidants.
Yeah, will you
And all, yeah.
back up real quick just for
Mhm.
biology 101? I do this in my sustainivore course where I actually show an atom and show what oxidative
Mhm.
stress is and what a free radical is. Would you just
Yep.
briefly remind people what that is if they don't remember high school biology?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the easiest analogies to think of, and I swear you and I did a joint presentation on this and actually showed this image, but like
Yeah.
would be like an apple browning, you know, like that's oxidation. Like that can happen at the cellular level, really. I mean, it can happen. It's what we're looking. Free radicals are coming in from you know, our external environment. They're byproducts of just regular metabolic processes in our body. It's both normal, and then we've also got excessive amounts, you know. And so when I think about oxidative stress, I think about, okay, how much of a burden does our body's own systems that typically deal with these things have? So our liver, for one, I mean, we all kind of know our liver has a role in detoxification. I mean, it requires a ton of nutrients just to function properly. It really requires a lot of B vitamins. B12 is a big one. We know that animal source foods are where we're getting B12. It requires a lot of amino acids. Glycine is a big one. That's one that
Mhm.
becomes conditionally essential actually in pregnancy. But, you know, so we've got to make sure there's enough resources really to deal with the burden, you know, that any individual is under, and that varies.
So
And
keeping their metabolic health up to date,
mhm,
and especially as we're seeing people delay pregnancy later
yeah.
and later, and you're not just concerned about getting pregnant, but scrambled DNA in the sperm, impacting the development of the baby.
Yes, exactly. And I'm really kind of trying to get out there and say too, that like a semen analysis, just getting a clear semen analysis is not enough to pick up on all the things. We still need men focusing on their preconception health, and, nutrients like vitamin D, like I mentioned, that's helpful more from a hormonal perspective. But things like vitamins A, C, and E, those are really important at repairing damage caused by free radicals. Big proponent of making sure that both men and women are really getting in enough of the retinol, vitamin A, source vitamin A, which is coming from animal source foods. B vitamins, like I said, that plays a role in methylation at a cellular level. That's needed for, if we think at a cellular level, that's needed for mitochondrial health. And egg and sperm are just full of mitochondria. In fact, the eggs have more mitochondria than most any other cell really in the body. And so we've got to really feed it. They're workhorses, they need a lot of energy.
And why do we care about what will you describe methylation, please? That's a word that gets thrown out a lot. And people hear they may not be methylating properly or whatever. And I don't think we've ever talked about that on the podcast.
Yeah, methylation it's a metabolic process that really falls into like our realm because there's so many nutrients involved in it, and it's required for the metabolism of certain nutrients like B12, folic acid. And methylation is something that just it does happen. It happens at, again, a cellular level. Like when to give it a more practical example, I mean, when an embryo is developing, methylation kind of goes into overdrive. It's for like that growth and, to happen. And so I think, there is quite a bit of misinformation out there and too much emphasis placed on MTHFR, the genetic SNP that you can have a variant in that kind of reduces your ability to process certain nutrients, certain forms of nutrients efficiently. But I think my issue with it is that we put so much emphasis on like that particular variant and not so much the nutrient sources. So really the problem comes in when you're getting excessive amounts of synthetic versions of certain nutrients like folic acid versus folate. So we don't see folic acid naturally in the food supply. That's a synthetic nutrient that's fortified and added, and our body has to be able to convert. And there's repercussions to not being able to convert it efficiently. You can get things called unmetabolized folic acid, which we know now does create problems in the body. And so that's something to kind of focus on, is the forms of nutrients, I think, more than worrying too much about your MTHFR status. So across the board, there's going to be forms that are better for everybody,
Right. And the food source forms are usually, ideal. And when there is a nutrient that's in plants and animals, the animal form is the one that's preferred. Especially when we're talking pregnancy. And we know from ancient cultures, the pregnant women are the ones that got the fish eggs and, got all those like the most nutrient dense foods.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In terms of a couple of other nutrients though, I mean, like zinc is a big one for men. It supports sperm DNA. It boosts sperm motility. It improves testosterone levels. So,
and that's not an easy one to get. Like if people aren't eating enough seafood, I mean, I'm thinking clams and other bivalves that are as the best source of zinc. Where else are they getting zinc? I know it's a really common nutrient deficiency worldwide.
Yeah. I mean, I'm often recommending shellfish, for that. And yeah, again, it's kind of interesting because I see a lot of recommendations around like nuts and seeds, but really that just doesn't compare at all to, what you're going to get in shellfish, so yeah.
Yeah. I can remember some of the nutrient density charts that I've made, and you kind of can't even, it's not fair to put oysters on any of them because it tips it. So it skews it so much that oysters are like 10 million times better than anything else, that then all your other bars look puny and you
Yep.
can't even see a difference in them because oysters are just so incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I always, in the practice, I mean, we've always recommended couples go, date nights with oysters, like go enjoy them. Or, if you don't have access to fresh oysters, like canned, smoked, and there's different ways to incorporate them, but they are very nutrient dense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or clam chowder is an easy
Mm-hmm.
one. Lily and I were talking about, how simple is that? You just
Mm-hmm.
clams and boil a potato, and there you go.
Yeah.
Pretty
Yeah.
much.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Did you know that by the time you're thirsty, you're likely dehydrated? In fact, about 75% of Americans are chronically dehydrated. And even mild dehydration has shown to impact concentration and memory in adults and in kids. Simply drinking plain water is not enough. You need to be adding electrolytes, sodium, potassium, and magnesium, which help your body absorb water and function at its best. My favorite brand is Element, started by my co-author and good friend, Rob Wolf. I really love the citrus flavor, but you can get a free sample pack of flavors with any purchase when you go to sustainabledish.com/element. Element has no sugar or dodgy ingredients and makes regular water taste amazing. It's the perfect way to keep you hydrated and on your game, both physically and mentally. I drink it every day. So check out sustainabledish.com/element for your free sample pack of flavors today. So you developed, what's it like to run a supplement company? You developed a supplement not only for women, but also for men.
Yeah, I mean, the way it arose was, I was basically working my practice thinking I need to piece together so many different things to really meet the needs of women and men that I just want to, and me very naively thinking I'm just going to go and create my own. And so, that's what I did. And what I really wanted though was not just to be behind like the formulation of it, but I wanted to be part of every step of the process. And I think that's what's really different about what I'm trying to do is that you have a health practitioner, a licensed, health practitioner is trained in the science behind every step of the process, where especially, these days with the challenges of the current climate, there's so many shortcuts that are just being taken because it's very difficult. It's really difficult to be in this business right now and consistently produce like the quality product that you want. I mean, the first run that I had to throw out completely, and it was really deflating.
And it's not like you could just taste it and
right,
know it
right.
was not right.
Yeah, exactly. So, this came out of just me really recognizing that I just feeling like there was not the formulas, the evidence-based formulas that I would want to see and use in my practice and take myself, or recommend to friends and family. So I wanted the formulas. I also wanted really exceptional quality standards, so third-party testing on every single lot. That's not done, in the supplement industry. And so getting and testing for all the major allergens, for identity, for contaminants. So there's a documented, a real problem especially with prenatal supplements with contaminants. And obviously that's a stage of life we don't want to be messing around with that sort of thing. And for men's fertility, there's very little still, available that's targeted to men's reproductive health. And even companies talking or educating on the importance of men's preconception health on pregnancy outcomes, because it goes so far, again, like I said, beyond just fertilization. So those are the reasons. But I mean, what we really are trying to do is be a fertility, wellness, and education brand where we're going to be moving the needle on how we're talking and treating fertility. And we've got a huge health practitioner network where we're trying to really help facilitate getting good evidence-based information out there.
Yeah. And so people can find it. You can just go to sustainabledish.com/FullWell. And that will take you to check out the supplement. What else? So talk about some of the foods and then maybe some of the other supplements. Like you couldn't get everything in here. And there definitely are brands that as practitioners, you and I way prefer over other ones. You mentioned, I mean, the supplement industry is shady and not regulated. And especially in the probiotic realm. I mean, I think I
Yeah.
read some study that they, every single one did not have
Yeah.
what the populations that they said they had in them. So talk about the foods on top of your supplement.
Mhm.
What else should they be looking at adding in?
Yeah, I mean, because I mean, you know me, and I would definitely qualify myself as a real food dietitian, and
Mm-hmm.
so I am always looking to how do we meet our needs with food first. The reason I got into supplements in the stage of life is that it's such a nutrient intense period, and we have so many holes and gaps really in our diets, our modern diets, and modern environmental stressors that, I just think this is the time where you need to kind of
Oh
you really do
yeah.
need to
I mean,
consider
why, if you could
supplements.
have an insurance policy
Hmm.
on, protecting just that extra level of protection, why wouldn't you do that
Yeah.
if the baby?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But this is really built on, a good foundational diet, taking this. And so to me, that means, if we use the most widely recommended, Mediterranean diet, like in the fertility space, that's what's recommended. Like if you go to, if it's even talked about in a fertility clinic or an OB's office, like that's the diet they're going to recommend. I say we just, we modify that, and we need to add in a lot more animal sourced foods into the mix as well. I mean, so, with FullWell's prenatal, we were able to fit 300 milligrams of choline in there, which is hard to do. It's a really big nutrient. And so it drives up the capsule number, and because it just takes up a lot of space. So does magnesium. Those are two really important nutrients that we need extra. We need more than what a typical diet provides. And so that's one of the reasons why we actually have as many capsules as we do per serving. So I'd like to point that out. But really, the 300 milligrams is not fully meeting your needs for choline. The newer research is pointing to upwards of almost 1,000 milligrams a day, being needed. And so,
Hmm.
and you're not going to get that through just like by eating a couple of eggs a day.
Yeah. How much, do you know off the top of your head? I can look it up while we're chatting.
Yeah, so for choline, it varies a little bit by egg, and I don't know why I'm not pulling this up, but it's only a couple hundred, maybe 100 or so milligrams. You can double check that on me, but I know, if you had FullWell's prenatal plus a couple of eggs every single day, really consistently, and some other like fringe kind of sources of choline, then you'd meet your minimum needs, which are set at around 500 milligrams, 550 milligrams daily. But to get to those higher levels that we're seeing better benefit with, and this is really, choline comes into play not just for early neural tube defect prevention and methylation and like embryo development, but also for baby's brain health.
Right.
It's
And I
really
mean,
key.
that's what we're trying to feed right
Yeah.
now and what's growing so rapidly.
Yep. So,
Okay. Oh, I pulled it up. So as you were talking and I was being all distracted and not looking at you, but I was actually listening. Uh, Chronometer doesn't have choline on it,
oh, it does.
which is,
Hmm.
well, it didn't on my
Yep.
phone app. Maybe it does on
Yeah.
the
The desktop might, I
desktop.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
But
we
I
do follow
have
that one.
milligrams per one hard-boiled egg is only 147, which is
Yeah.
27% of your daily value. And that's for non-pregnant people.
Yeah. But I was going to say, I think it's around the 100, 200 milligram mark for choline. So it's
Wow.
like, we hear about eggs a lot, with the yolk as being a great choline source.
But
It is
that's,
good. It is good compared to like if you see peanut butter on the list. I mean, you're getting negligible amounts from
yeah, the
peanut
next
butter.
one would be beef at 117, and then it like goes way down, and chicken breast is 72 milligrams for 3 ounces, which is only 13%
Mm-hmm.
of your
Yep.
daily value.
And most prenatal vitamins will have negligible amounts of choline in them. Maybe they're fitting in 50 milligrams, something that it's not evidence based and not really helpful. And that's again because it does drive up the capsule space and capsule number. But it's a tough one to meet. You've got to have good dietary intake combined with supplements to really get there. Organ
And for,
meat, will
I
help.
was just going to
Mhm.
mention, as a parent, I think one of
Mhm.
the reasons my son is like gigantic now. I don't know if you've seen him lately, but he's
Every time I see him, he's grown like a foot. I'm like,
yeah, yeah. And what far exceeded anyone in the family. But of course, I'm taking credit for this. I feed my kids eggs, and I have ever since they were little, like at least three eggs a day for them. And then the rule in my house, and I know Michelle Tam had the same rule, like when I was like experimenting with crazy recipes, they just have to try it. And if they don't like it, they can have eggs.
That's good. I'm going to try that at home, actually.
Anyway, sorry.
They're packed. I mean, eggs, including especially with the yolk are packed with a lot of really good nutrients. But yeah, I think my main point there is, that it takes multiple servings of different animal source foods along with a good supplement to really get to your needs with choline. And then vitamin D is just another one for both, women and men is so hard to keep levels up. I mean, especially it depends on the latitude you live at, but vitamin D, I've seen some, and I'm not sure if you've seen it, but, a little bit of backlash against vitamin D. And it's a hard one for me to understand because it's the most studied nutrient. And while we do have problems with, nutrition research, we have a lot of randomized clinical control trials on vitamin D and the importance of it and the benefit and the functions. And so we know that 4,000 IUs, a higher dose than what's typically being recommended, is not only safe, but really shown to be the minimum amount that women need to keep their levels even somewhat adequate throughout pregnancy for babies need. And that goes into like skeletal development. It's really important.
And dependent on calcium intake, which, not everyone's getting enough calcium.
Right. Yeah. That's actually something that we used to see that most people were actually meeting their calcium needs through diet alone. And that's not the case now. And it definitely hasn't been the case in my client population who maybe are avoiding dairy for a variety of reasons or having trouble tolerating it and incorporating it in and things like that. We usually try to get to the root cause of what that is and get it back in, but
just flat out, a lot of people just are not consuming the levels of milk or the cans of sardines that we once did. And those are really, the main sources of calcium intake in our culture. And soy milk, just because it's white and called milk, actually has a lot of phytates in it and can block calcium absorption. And so anyhow, so do you, now I know supplementing with calcium has also been questioned. Do you, I don't know much. What's your status on calcium supplementation?
I think it does come down to the form. You want to be using a highly bioavailable, form of calcium. I do put 400 milligrams, in the prenatal, which I feel like is judicious, but does help meet the needs, which there's a balance. There's such a delicate balance. And it's also kind of a matter of being in good ratio relationship with the other nutrients too. So magnesium, we have at a higher level too at 300 milligrams. So that's helping balance that. The vitamin D is higher. So that all really helps. And like I said, again, the form of calcium is, also important. There are less bioavailable forms that you can use. So, we want to get it in from diet, but, there are a very safe form like calcium malate, easy to absorb. And I think preconception, pregnancy, postpartum, like that's the time to do a little extra calcium for sure.
Yeah. And magnesium, we see that in a bunch of different forms as well. So we chat about that because so many people are just like, oh, multi, great, boom, done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just not, it's not always in the best form. So yeah.
Yeah. It's like, there's forms that are easier for our body to absorb and also to utilize. And then there's also tolerance that comes into effect, comes into play too. And I think about that a lot with the prenatal because, or really any of these supplements, if someone's not feeling great on them, it's very hard to take consistently. And then you're risking not getting enough of the things that you really need, so that's important. When it comes to magnesium, I looked at, back when I was formulating this, most prenatals were using the least expensive form of magnesium, which is also the least bioavailable, most difficult to tolerate, magnesium oxide.
And which has the opposite effect of taking too much iron.
Yes. So definitely can have a laxative effect to it.
Yeah.
I have a real problem with that form of magnesium.
I can't even look at it.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes me so sick.
And to give you I just have to mention this too. This is another example of where like you really want a health practitioner, someone who understands that, like the different forms of magnesium behind the manufacturing process, because there are raw ingredient suppliers that are marketing their magnesium glycinate, and it's actually quite a high percentage magnesium oxide, so it's not, you've got to really dig into it all to find what you want. So we have magnesium glycinate, which is a very gentle, easy to absorb and utilize form of magnesium. And I'm confident in it being magnesium glycinate. That's also important.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure everyone else can tell your passion for quality, in all of this, which is really great. And again, the supplement industry, I mean, there's a reason why, there's been labels of snake oil salesmen out there, is because a lot of it is very overpriced garbage. So as people are, maybe looking for fatty acid supplements or something else to complement what you're doing, what are some of the other things people want to consider, and some of the brands that you love?
Yeah. Well, we are coming out with a essential fatty acid supplement, a really a sustainably sourced fish oil. Not easy to find that these days. That's going to be good quality and not have contaminants that we'd be concerned about. So that's taken me a really long time to source, and we expect that like late spring 2022. So I'm excited about that one.
Cool.
Because I'm also really focused on, with this brand, offering like premium level ingredients and formulas, but trying to make it as affordable as possible. I don't have like investors, and not trying to meet like, algorithms for Amazon and like all those things to sell the supplement. So it helps me to kind of keep things controlled, price wise. But that's my goal with the fish oil too, is it's really something that, in addition to a prenatal, you're going to want an essential fatty acid supplement that has at a minimum 400 milligrams of DHA, 200 to 300 milligrams of EPA. And, I see there's a lot of algae-based sourced essential fatty acid supplements coming out. I've dug into that a bit from a sustainability perspective. I mean, it's one of those things where I'm wondering, a little bit, the conversation, like how accurate it is. Like you'd be someone to dig into that. I did.
Yeah, I looked into, for the book Sacred Cow, I looked into these claims of veganics farming, where you have algae-based fertilizer, and the greenhouse gas emissions from the production of that are atrocious. One of the worst producers there were. And then you have to consider trucking that everywhere, and when you can just use animals to graze, so it didn't make any sense at all. But you've got these people, especially that don't have any experience farming, claiming that veganic agriculture is the way to go, when it makes no sense at all. And we know, DHA, you really need to get that from animal source foods, and the algae supplements just aren't the same.
Yeah. And, and that was my assessment as well, with that. And so we are looking at fish oil. And I think that's what I recommend. Ideally, I'd love to see, people eating fish, especially during for fertility, pregnancy, postpartum, multiple times a week at a minimum, but including things like sardines and oysters, like, so 2 good servings of fish plus like sardines and oysters in their diet. And there's the possibility of meeting your needs, that way, through food sources, but it takes a real consistent effort, and it's hard to do, and you've got to start preconception.
Yeah. And you and I live in New England, where fish consumption is actually relatively high compared to the rest of the US, and I fish is actually my favorite animal protein more
Mhm.
than red meat. And I eat it not every day, but almost every single day.
Mhm.
But the reality is
Yeah.
people in general, I mean, when I post a fish recipe, it's the least popular recipe possible. I post it for everybody's own good, not for
Mhm.
clicks. And just nobody wants to eat fish. They
I
think it's
know. I
gross.
know. Yeah, so it's like, while you can do it, the reality is, we're not really. So I think, yeah, a fish oil supplement's the way to go. We like, and we have been recommending in the interim, Nordic Naturals. I think some problematic things, but it's not bad. They're prenatal DHA. I love, outside of pregnancy, I really love New Chapter's Whole Omega, which has a really nice broad spectrum fatty acid, essential fatty acid profile, but you can't get there for the DHA content and even the EPA really. But the EPA actually gets too high, DHA is too low when you do that. So what happens with some of the fish oils that are a little more specialized for this stage of life is you do concentrate down the essential fatty acids that we're needing more of, so you can get the ratios that you're looking for. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been working with Dr. Deborah Gordon out in Oregon for my own health, and I'm approaching the opposite end of the spectrum from the preconception, and I've been feeling so much better taking a really high DHA
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
supplement.
Yeah,
So,
great for brain health, and
mhm,
yeah, protecting our brain as we age as well. Mm-hmm.
yeah, as we age,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm right there with you. I think back when we first met, I was like 8 weeks pregnant and super nauseous with my first, but I'm beyond that now too. Yeah.
Yeah. What kind of tips do you give? I mean, that's a common problem. Often goes away right at like
Yeah.
clockwork at 12 weeks, often, but not always. And so when people have aversions,
Yeah.
especially to things like organ meats or fish, what I mean, I have my own list of foods that I like to eat when I'm feeling nauseous, but what do you recommend?
Yeah, this is again why, it's a reality that there's some things you can do to mitigate it. Like, by having your nutrient status be in really good place, especially B6 levels, and continuing to try to take B6, that can help with the nausea. But a lot of it is it's just the blood volume increases, the hormone changes. It's stuff that cannot be avoided. And
Mm-hmm.
so part of it is trying to build up your stores so that you can kind of have some flexibility to deal with
Mm-hmm.
not being able to eat the most nutrient dense diet in the first trimester.
Mm-hmm.
That can help you kind of skate through, especially if you can try to take your prenatal throughout it. But also, I'm also an herbalist, and so I like to employ a lot of, herbs in the mix, and even just, ginger. We can think of that even just as more of a food, but a ginger juice is my favorite thing to recommend, because you really don't have to. You can just take a chunk of ginger, wash it. You don't even have to peel it. You throw it in the blender with some water and make like a slurry, and then you just strain it through a colander, and you could, throw it in ice cube trays. And I just found like doing that, like adding that to a little bit of water or having a little bit of that concentrated ginger juice, it was the most helpful thing for me personally and my clients. So like a good concentrated ginger juice can really help. Some part of it is so same with digestive bitters,
Mm-hmm.
because part of it is I think is more of a motility issue, like with all the progesterone and the relaxin hormone being produced, things are just not moving, and so if you can kind of keep things moving motility wise, that also can really help. So like Urban Moonshine, I believe last I checked, they're still making their calm tummy bitters, which has like chamomile and ginger and safe pregnancy herbs, and that's an awesome one for that first trimester and beyond.
Yeah. I always like peppermint tea, but I don't know if that's safe for pregnant. And that's another reason why you want to be checking with a dietitian that is familiar with pregnancy. Is peppermint safe? I forget.
It is. I don't tend to recommend peppermint essential oil. Definitely not peppermint essential oil internally, like really at any point, but
Oh
not
no, I'm
even a
talking about
ton of
tea
that.
that
But if it's
I'm
just
sipping.
tea,
Yeah.
most things as a tea are safe during pregnancy. It's
Okay.
pretty low volume, yeah, of herb overall.
Yeah. And then when I'm nauseous for food, I always find that just like ground beef, rice, and salt
Yeah.
are like, that's the only thing I'm craving when I'm,
Yeah. Just keep it
can't eat
really
anything
simple.
else. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Really just keep it really simple and not letting your blood sugars drop too low either, especially in pregnancy from not eating. That just like perpetuates the nausea cycle.
Yeah. And for folks that didn't listen to the podcast I did with Lily Nichols, she's got the most amazing book on
she does.
What's it called?
Real Food for Pregnancy.
Real Food for Pregnancy,
yeah.
right. Oh my gosh, I drew a blank there. So Ayla, where can people find you?
Yeah, so I on Instagram, we're at FullWell Fertility, and we do a lot there for education. Then FullWellFertility.com is the website. I'm also at Ayla Barmmer _RD, on Instagram. And my practice is Boston Functional Nutrition, but we are not taking clients right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know I need to get over there and pick up a few things that are over at the office. So I promise I'll get over there soon. I think it's easier for us to even do a podcast than it is for us to get together right now, just because of life. And how busy you are with your kids and everything. But it was really nice to see you. And I hope this was helpful to anyone thinking about conceiving. Thank you
for having me on.
Thanks so much for listening today and for following my work. If you believe in making sure people all over the world should have access to nutritious food, please join my mission through my nonprofit, the Global Food Justice Alliance. Visit sustainabledish.com/join and become a sustaining member today. All sustaining members get early access to ad-free podcasts plus free downloads, and you'll be helping get healthy protein like meat, fish, and eggs to food insecure kids. That's sustainabledish.com/join. And thank you.